Chapter 188 to 194. Ding! A piercing sound of metal clash echoed. Homusubi leaped backward and landed on a tree. He noticed that a large part of the kunai blade was missing and several cracks on the metal extended up to the handle. Turning his head to look in the opponent's direction, Homusubi noticed that the short knife in Fugaku's hand was undamaged, meaning that the sword is of a high grade, which is not strange considering that Uchiha Fugaku is the patriarch of the Uchiha clan. At this time, Fugaku, who was holding the short knife, looked up as his eyes turned red with 3 black tomo spinning in them. The brief confrontation just now was a loss of Homusubi, but Homusubi didn't suffer any damage because of the timely retreat. All the Uchiha clan members who have awakened the fully matured Sharingan are generally masters of taijutsu, good with almost all kinds of weapon, as Sharingan allows the user to easily replicate any kind of technique with perfection as long as the physique of the user is up to it. At this time, Suijin printed the hand seals and pressed his hands on the flowing water waves, and shouted, "Ice release, freezing wave." Why-ish. Instantly under the influence of cold ice nature chakra, the water of the great waterfall previously used by him instantly froze, turning the surrounding forest into a cold field. Suijin can obviously create such an effect by directly using the ice release, but he has found that by first using the water style to create a large source of water and then use ice style to freeze the said water consumes less chakra than the direct use of ice release with a similar effect, which is why using a water technique to fill the surrounding battlefield in water has become a sort of habit for him. The Uchiha shinobi all leaped away from the encasing cold ice, and looking at the giant field of ice, not only were they not afraid or shocked but more excited and more zealous to fight. "Patriarch, you don't have to action, let us be the ones to deal with these two." "Yes, just 2 bounty ninjas, this would be a perfect exercise." Sandame has really started to get old, he couldn't even solve 2 bounty ninjas. The geared-up elites of the Konoha police force either had one hand over their waists or crossed over their chest, each one more confident than the other. The patriarch Uchiha Fugaku had a frowned expression. He clearly felt signs of Uchiha's fighting skills in the short clash just now with Homusubi. Although the other party tried his best to cover it, Fugaku was able to see through courtesy of his experience. Listening to the unscrupulous taunting and teasing from the elites of the Konoha police force, Suijin sneered, "Nah, Homusubi, we have a lot of Uchiha here, it's a good opportunity to gouge out some of their Sharingan, don't you think? The best method of offending the Uchiha is by trampling over their pride. The Sharingan is the pride of the Uchiha clan, so speaking about gauging out their Sharingan is the most effective." Homusubi knew that Suijin was deliberately angering the Uchiha clansmen but still felt a bit uncomfortable by the straight-off approach. Sighing lightly at his helplessness, he nodded nonetheless. On the opposite side, the faces of the Uchiha elites changed as if they had been cursed. In normal times, Uchiha may have not been so offended as they are now, but with how they are being treated in the village, their anger was instantly raging and fuming. "You want to die so badly. Scumbags, you dare eyeing the Sharingan of the Uchiha clan. That's it, you both will die here, even Sandame will not say anything." Fugaku ignored the clansman's shout, stepping forward to look at Homusubi. He questioned, "Who are you, people? Who might it be that the Uchiha patriarch is interested in? Who 2 meager bounty nin are? I think we should be proud of such an achievement, and as a sign of gratefulness I would definitely like to introduce, I am Suijin, and he is Homusubi of the Amatsukami. We are what you may refer to as bounty nins/mercenary, as long as it is for money, we are willing to do anything. Would you like to give us some task?" replied Suijin. Uchiha Fugaku pondered for a moment and asked tentatively from Homusubi, "Are you Shinichi?" Homusubi was a bit surprised that Fugaku mistook him for Shinichi but shook his head. Suijin said, "I am afraid that you are mistaking us for someone else. Uchiha patriarch, no one with the name Uchiha Shinichi is part of our organization." Fugaku had a thoughtful expression upon hearing the reply, although he is still not sure whether both of them are speaking the truth or not. The Konoha policeman couldn't hold back anymore because of the constant disrespectful tone of the other side, said, "Patriarch, since that person is not Shinichi, then there is no further need for hesitation. After mocking the great Uchiha clan, they can never be forgiven and must be dealt with the appropriate measure." Uchiha Fugaku suppressed his doubt as his eyes turned cold and he nodded silently. That was the signal the Uchiha elites needed and suddenly took action one after another. Fire release, fireball technique. Fire release, dragon fire technique. Fire style, Phoenix Sage fire technique. The 3 leading Uchiha elites were divided into 3 sides. The one in the middle used the fireball technique, the one on the left used the dragon fire technique, while the one on the right used the phoenix fire technique. The 3 fire-style jutsus were released instantly, rushing towards Suijin. Suijin obviously didn't dare to be careless and immediately sealed. Water release, water formation wall. A tall wall of water immediately rose from the grounds that covered Suijin and Homasubi, protecting the two from the three fire jutsu. Boom! 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 The three fire ninjutsu collided with the water wall, creating the roaring sound of water vapors that enveloped the field. The thick layer of mist again covered the battlefield. With the Byakugan activated, Suijin warned Homasubi, "Be ready, they are coming." Homasubi nodded. He knew better than anyone that these elites are nothing to be taken lightly. Whyish! 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 Both of them were ready. Suddenly the sound of shuriken cutting through the wind reached Suijin's ears. Suijin did a backflip and caught 6 of the shuriken with extremely perfect ease while still in midair and shot them back the moment he landed back on the ground. Almost the same moment Suijin landed on the ground, 2 figures jumped out of the mist and rushed towards him, one with a large broadsword while the other that wrapped thin metal chains over his knuckles. Suijin had already noticed their arrival and tapped his foot on the ground as an ice wall rose to momentarily block the incoming Uchiha with the chains. Suijin then created an ice adamantine staff which wasn't as strong as the real adamantine staff but was useful nonetheless and used it to block the incoming sword slash from the sword carried by the other Uchiha. Blocking him midway, the two started a battle of Kenjutsu versus Bokujutsu. The opponent is a proficient Kenjutsu user and Suijin was able to keep up with his movements courtesy to the Byakugan, which allowed him to see the flow of chakra of the other party. At this time, there was a red light that flashed a glimmer of scorching heat coming from the side and the rising mist. Suijin understood that the enemy's plan. With the fireball coming to his side, the Kenjutsu user increased the intensity of his strikes, intent on not giving any opportunities for him to dodge, and the great fireball swallowed the both of them. The 3 Uchiha standing nearby glanced at each other, when one of them, the one in the middle, asked the one on the right, "Did it work?" Before he could answer, a figure appeared out of the mist and punched him in the gut, sending him across. The 2 Uchiha didn't need to be signaled as they pounced on him with their respective weapons. On the other side, Homasubi led the battle deeper into the forest as the Uchiha also chased after him. Not far away, Uchiha Fugaku along with the other Uchiha elites stood on the canopy of a tall tree with his hands crossed over his chest looking at the 2 battlefields with deep concentration. The resounding symphony of the metal collision, fist, and feet collision from time to time, the scorching heat of the fire jutsu, the chilling cold of the ice techniques, thundering lighting, and splattering mud made the battlefield extremely chaotic, and he could judge that the battle was indeed quite fierce. It seems that the 2 of them are indeed good. The elite force that Fugaku brought with him consists of 17 Jonin-class shinobi, with an absolute advantage in numbers besieging the opposite team. Fugaku wasn't worried, but the result was still a bit unexpected. "Humph, even if they are somewhat good, but they still won't be able to defeat all the elites," muttered Fugaku. Although the strength that the other party displayed surprised him, Fugaku still wasn't worried. Besides, it's not like the fog is the hidden mist jutsu, therefore, the Uchiha are perfectly capable of seeing through it. Being forced to separate from Homasubi, Suijin was under the siege of multiple Uchiha at the same time and didn't have time to take care of any thought then to defend himself. After ducking down to avoid a heavy punch from the burly Uchiha, Suijin turned around and punched him heavily in the ribs, at the same time, kicked his left knee to trip the balance of the other party. With the Uchiha almost losing his balance, Suijin's ice-covered hand was rushing towards opponent's throat. Whyish! But before he could pierce through, the sound of kunai cutting through wind sounded and Suijin had to lean back to safely avoid the attack. Although Suijin leaned back, he was able to see the thin metal wire tied to the kunai. Immediately afterward, the metal wire was slammed backward, entangled the burly Uchiha restrained by Suijin, and pulled him out of the direct attack range. TCH. Annoyed for being letting the prey escape, Suijin clicked his tongue and printed the hand seals and shouted, "Ice release, demonic mirroring ice crystals." Accompanied by the freezing sound, the crystal clear ice mirrors started appearing on the battlefield one after another. This time, Suijin used the conventional technique, so the ice mirrors appeared in a hemispherical shape. The sheer number of mirrors was so high that it covered a large part of the battlefield inside. Every ice mirror is an extension of his chakra, therefore, he was able to sense everything within the territory, giving a subtle yet not so similar effect as that of the Byakugan perception. While Suijin was able to cope up with the situation quite well, Homasubi was having a hard time. The teachings he has been indoctrinated with from his childhood are restraining him from lifting his blade against fellow villagers and clansmen, so when fighting against the fellow villagers, he was only able to use about 30 to 40% of his strength, and that too only for parrying and dodging. In this regard, both Itachi and Shinichi are undoubtedly much better and would never let their teaching affect their combat power. But then again, they are different people with different ideologies. The sudden appearance of so many ice mirrors immediately attracted the attention of the members of the Konoha police force. One of the Uchiha elite who has previously dealt with such a jutsu immediately shouted out the warning, "Everyone, be careful, this ice jutsu is very troublesome." One of the shinobi who is particularly proficient in fire release said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of these mirrors." Said, and in an instant, he printed his hand seals and released a burst of flames that were as hot as boiling lava. Boom! Out came the explosive sound when the flames collided with the ice mirrors, but much to the surprise of many there was not even a tiny water droplet on the ice mirror, indicating that neither the heat was enough nor was the impact enough to break the ice mirror. The main reason for this is that the surrounding ice was constantly lowering the temperature of the forest, therefore, the fire-style jutsu was not up to the task. Fire release, fire dragon flame bullet. Wind release, great breakthrough. Realizing that just fire style isn't going to work considering the cold surroundings, two Uchiha shinobi combined together and used a combination technique of fire and wind to flame the fire. With the added boost from the wind-style jutsu, the fire dragon was really gigantic and fiercely pounced on the ice mirrors, easily smashing through them in one fell swoop. Just when the Uchiha elites were trying to break free of the ice mirror's siege, Suijin hiding inside them was not idle. He traveled from one mirror to the other like a ghost and swapped out, knocking out one individual after another. It is said that the speed of traveling from one mirror to the other is instantaneous, or better yet, light speed, which is obviously not true, otherwise the Sharingan wouldn't able to capture the movement, but even if his movements were being captured by the Sharingan, Suijin was still able to knock out the members of the police force one after another. Although he had to endure some injuries, nothing too serious. At this time, Uchiha Fugaku, who hasn't yet moved from his position and was standing outside the demonic ice mirror's formation, frowned. The muffled sound of people falling one after another made him realize the seriousness. Now he even started to doubt that the two bounty nin could escape from Sandaime-sama, perhaps not just because of luck. Finally decided to take action, Fugaku quickly printed the hand seals and shouted, "Fire release, fireball technique." Boom! A raging flame ball pierced through the sky, engulfing the ice mirror completely. The heat of the flame was so high that it almost melted the entire top in a moment. Whoosh! As soon as a gap appeared in the formation, the figure flickered and firmly landed on the ground. With Fugaku's arrival, the Uchiha gathered around the patriarch, supporting each other, and their heads down due to the embarrassment of not being able to deal with just two bounty nin even with such an overwhelming advantage of numbers. Fugaku didn't look away, just said indifferently, "Retreat, I will deal with the two of them." The shinobi no longer had their previous arrogance and stepped back one after another, leaving room for the patriarch. Fugaku looked at the two bounty nin on the opposite side and said in a deep voice, "I seem to have underestimated the two of you, but this is as far as you go." Suijin smiled softly. He was about to say something. However, before he realized, the surrounding became black and white, everything disappeared, and even the demonic mirror formation that was an extension of his perception was cut off. All he could see was just a combination of black and white. Genjutsu was his only thought. There are very few times when Suijin had to deal with genjutsu. The first was a simple demonstration by the teacher in the ninja academy, the second was by genjutsu pill used by Orochimaru to give him certain experience. Other than these times, nobody bothered to use genjutsu to deal with small-time chunin. Later he awakened the Tenseigan, therefore, ordinary genjutsu became meaningless. Therefore, Suijin doesn't have much experience in dealing with complex genjutsu. The moment Suijin understood that he has been hit by genjutsu, the first thing to do was cut off his thinking. This could be any type of genjutsu, and since Suijin didn't know its mechanism, therefore, it was best to not think anything, it might give away some information he doesn't want to leak. And Suijin isn't much worried. There is also Homasubi with him, who is actually Uchiha Shursui. And who is Uchiha Shursui? Uchiha Shursui is someone who awakened Koto Amatsukami, and his genjutsu shouldn't be any inferior to Uchiha Fugaku and is unlikely to be subdued to Fugaku with just a genjutsu. For that reason, Suijin analyzed the genjutsu spread before him with great interest. Is it possible that it is a Manjikyu Sharingan ability of Uchiha Fugaku? Even if he is actually using a water clone body, Kuroto's spiritual strength that has gone through Tenseigan awakening is still very high, not something that would easily be affected by genjutsu, and since Fugaku could take him in a genjutsu with just a glance, even before Suijin could realize, must mean that what he used isn't an ordinary genjutsu. While Suijin was mulling over, a purple chakra invaded the black and white world from the sky. This? To Suijin's surprise, the purple chakra gathered more and more, slowly taking the form of a figure. It turned back and faced Suijin. "You are..." Suijin was really surprised again as he knew what it was. Fugaku glanced at Suijin, who has lost consciousness, but was standing still as if he was a stone statue. This scene scared Homasubi. In his cognition, Hyuga Kuroto is the strongest in Konohagakure, even Sandaime-sama may not be as strong as him. This is why Homasubi didn't expect Suijin to be taken in by Fugaku's genjutsu so easily. In shock and panic, Homasubi's 3 Tomo Sharingan instantly turned into a 4-pointed pinwheel. At this time, Fugaku sheathed the shinobi sword in his hand, at his waist, and asked in a deep voice, while slowly walking towards Homasubi, "Answer me, who are you?" The absent-minded Homasubi glanced at Suijin, who was still standing like a rock. Looking at Homasubi's action, Fugaku coldly said, "Don't bother, he is under genjutsu." Attracted by Fugaku's cold voice, Homasubi turned towards him and noticed the 3 dots followed by 3 curves spiraling counterclockwise around the pupil. Seeing those cold eyes, Homasubi gulped with a guilty conscience and took a step back in fear that Fugaku will figure out that it is him. Fugaku kept walking forward calmly, giving off an intimidating aura. "You don't need to enact anymore, you may have tried your best to hide it, but your taijutsu, shurikenjutsu, kenjutsu, all styles have the shadows of Uchiha clan written within them. Others may not be able to see through this, but I am perfectly capable. Put down that mask and reveal just who are you. I am still willing to give you a chance to explain yourself." Fugaku feels familiar with the person behind that mask and cloak. Initially, he thought that it was Uchiha Shinichi who defected from Konoha and joined some bounty-nin organization, at least according to the rumors, but after observing the so-called Homasubi for a while, Fugaku realized that this person is indeed not Shinichi, but he is undeniably an Uchiha, so his thoughts turned on to other possibilities. Maybe Shursui? But this absurd thought was soon removed from his head because with the upright, loyal and kind nature Shursui has, it is impossible to betray the village no matter how much he suffers. Shursui might not choose the clan over the village, but he will never betray both at the same time and join some bounty-nin organization. Moreover, doing something like killing the head ninja of Kumo delegates is impossible with Shursui's character. Firstly because Shursui was responsible for protecting them and secondly, because Shursui should very well understand that such an action could lead to war, and peace-loving Shursui wouldn't want to take such risk, just for a meager bounty. For this reason, Fugaku has been a little confused, he couldn't figure out who could be the person. In the face of Fugaku's aggressive questioning, Homasubi chose to remain silent. "Do you still not understand? You have no chance of escaping, seeing that you are an Uchiha. I am willing to look over your actions, but you must show sincerity and reveal yourself. Answer my question and take off that mask on your own, else the consequences will be far more disastrous than some light punishment for you," warned Fugaku. Homasubi was still silent. Fugaku sighed, and the next thing Homasubi discovered was that everything around him had become black and white. All the solid materials in view before him was a shade of black and white. Suddenly a pair of Manjikyu Sharingan with the same pattern as that of Fugaku appeared in the sky. At this time, an indifferent omnipotent voice resounded in the black and white world, "It's your last chance, take off the mask and explain yourself." Seeing that everything before him becoming pure black and white, Homasubi asked doubtfully, "What kind of genjutsu is this?" The indifferent voice came again, "It's not a complete genjutsu." "Not a complete genjutsu?" Homasubi muttered in confusion. "Indeed, Taikyakuzu, that is the name of this dojutsu. In simple terms, it's a yin-yang prison world, a semi-genjutsu world. Once your soul enters here, you will fall in an eternal genjutsu bound by the struggle of good and evil in your heart. A human has both good and evil in his heart, good and evil constantly struggle for dominance, and this struggle is something humans cannot rid themselves of. As long as someone has even a bit of both in their hearts, they will never be able to break free of this prison world. Once your soul enters this prison world, it will forever be trapped here, thus your body will be devoid of your soul, which is akin to death. But you will not die, you will be alive, bound eternally by the struggle of good and evil in your heart. There is no escape unless I wish for it, where you rid yourselves of either good or evil in your heart, which is impossible. As such there is no eska .. Halfway through the conversation, Fugaku suddenly stopped. It's because he suddenly found that the black and white, which symbolizes evil and good, yin and yang, that was about to invade the opponent suddenly dispersed, and the space filled with the caw of countless crows. Thousands of crows flew and circled around Homasubi's spiritual body, protecting from inside and out. The omnipotent vice was no longer omnipotent and spoke in a manner of surprise. "Absurd, how is this possible? You are able to break free. Does that mean you rid yourself of either good or evil? But such a thing is simply impossible. It's actually simple, the yin-yang prison world you speak of is actually the subject's own spiritual world. What you do is cut off the link of the soul with the body, therefore, trapping the person here eternally in the struggle of two conflicting ideologies, where one will only question himself. As you said, a human cannot rid himself of either of the two, so there is no escape, as such he is forever trapped here, alive, yet dead at the same time. The black and white are the disordered yin-yang energies, they also symbolize conflicting ideologies in one's heart. The more black, the more evil, the more white the more goodness. A genjutsu that traps its victim in an eternal struggle of two conflicting ideologies, indeed an extremely powerful dojutsu. but not something that cannot be broken. All I did is cast a genjutsu on myself to break the struggle in my heart. By doing so, the struggle of conflicting ideologies in my heart disappears, and thus I can re-establish that connection and take control of my own spiritual world, therefore, successfully breaking free. Homusubi explained. But to be able to do that, you must have cast a genjutsu that can change ideologies itself. Any normal Sharingan genjutsu is incapable of such a thing, and would never be able to do change ideology no matter how skilled you are. Which can only mean, don't tell me, you have them too. But if that's the case, just who are you? The omnipotent voice questioned solemnly, Are you Uchiha M? Madara? Uchiha Madara? No, I am not him. I am, Sai. I am Homusubi, the one who holds the seat of fire in Amatsukami. This was the moment. For the peace of village that he loves. For the glory of the clan that he loves. The final hesitation started to disappear. Now what remained was the determination to fall, no matter how deeper, for the clan and for the village. So, you don't deny that you have the Manjikyu Sharingan. After a pause, the voice became furious. Neither you are Shisui nor you are Shinichi or Madara. Then who are you? Why do you have Manjikyu Sharingan? Answer my question. Was it you who attacked Konoha and released the Kyuubi? Are you the person behind that disaster? Are you the one responsible for the death of Yondaime? It is not just a rumor that Kyuubi was being controlled by the Sharingan on the night of the Kyuubi's attack. Fugaku himself knows that it was true as he witnessed the scarlet 3-tomo ring in Kyuubi's eyes. Which signified that Kyuubi was indeed being controlled by someone of the Uchiha clan. And Fugaku knows that anything remotely below the Manjikyu Sharingan is incapable of controlling a Bijuu. Therefore, he has always suspected that there might be an Uchiha with Manjikyu Sharingan, possibly hidden inside the village or maybe outside the village. There exists a shinobi who bears the name Uchiha and harbors deep hatred towards the clan and the village, at the same time, possess necessary power to be able to cause chaos. The first guess is obviously Uchiha Madara. Why did Fugaku conclude it to be Madara who is supposed to be dead? Obviously, because Fugaku knows of the existence of Izanagi, therefore, he cannot deny the possibility that Uchiha Madara may still be alive, and only Madara possesses enough hatred and necessary power to control Kyuubi and destroy Konoha. And now that there stands a person before him who has the Manjikyu Sharingan, with the visual prowess superior to him must mean that it is him. But from the behavior of the other party, Fugaku doesn't think that he is Madara. This is because Fugaku's father had told him about what kind of man Madara was or is? And if this person is neither Madara, nor Shisui, or Shinichi, then who is he? Fugaku was now seriously angry. It is only because of this damn Homusubi of Amatsukami that the Uchiha clan has been suffering from all the blame. In anger, Fugaku put more strength in the genjutsu. The other party must not be allowed to live anymore. One might be able to temporarily fool himself out of his ideological struggle, but this fooling can never be forever. Within the human heart lingers these struggles, he just has to incite it. With Fugaku's urging, the pair of Manjikyu Sharingan in the sky started circling along their central axis. As a result, the entire space again started to turn black and white, the white endless ground and the black endless sky, no sign of the horizon as the two seemed to never intersect. There were also countless white and black kanji characters floating above the ground and in the sky. This is Taikyakuza's dimension, the eternal yin-yang prison, a prison that eternally restricts you. At the same time, Homusubi's Manjikyu Sharingan under his mask also started rotating as a trail of blood flowed from his two eye sockets, resisting the eternal prison. As a result, a tug-of-war started between the two of the strongest Uchiha. Downstream along the river. Tap. 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 Amidst the sound of water stepping, a group of shinobi flew across the river. While running, Sasori turned his head and glanced back at the Konoha shinobi following him, as well as the kunai and shuriken tied with exploding tags, as well as other throwing ninja tools being shot towards him. While continuously running, Sasori didn't stop flicking his fingers that had the chakra strings tied to them and controlled the puppet in red robes. Ding! 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 The puppet waved the sword as per Sasori's directions and all the kunai shuriken etc. were sent off the track so that they would not harm him. At the same time, the fingers of his other hand flicked, the other puppets controlled by him suddenly opened their mouth and shot out countless senbon at the pursuers. Sandaime's face sank seeing this, and he hurriedly used the adamantine staff in his hand to block the senbon shot towards them. The Konoha Umbu officers were also not behind, some simply dodged, some used defensive ninjutsu to block, while the other countered with kenjutsu or bokujutsu, and other suitable methods. Pierce. Suddenly an Umbu shinobi who wasn't able to defend against all the senbon and was pierced by a senbon that managed to get past his defense fell head-on into the river. The Umbu next to him didn't wait and immediately helped him, only to find that his skin had turned purple, indicating the symptoms of poisoning. Having some knowledge of poison, he tried extracting the poison while also warned everyone, be careful of the poison. Sandaime shouted at this time, the Hokage platoon will stay with me, while the rest will chase after Kakuzu. Yes, Hokage-sama. The Umbu members responded and chased after Kakuzu. Kakuzu, who was gradually moving away from Sasori, saw the large number of Umbu rushing towards him and cursed inwardly at the two bastards. Sighing lightly, he increased his speed and dived into the forest on the opposite bank of the river. In the forest on the other side of the river bank, more than a dozen after images flickered and flashed from one position to another under the cold moonlight, and from time to time the source of these after images would collide together, producing the sharp sound of metal clashing as the golden sparks flew around that illuminated the forest for minute intervals and then suddenly dispersed into darkness. Boom! Kicking away a Konoha Umbu, Kakuzu hadn't had time to catch his breath when another Umbu rushed towards him. Humph! Kakuzu snorted in disdain and jumped on the tree. The slight breeze was blowing, and Kakuzu standing on the canopy of the tree had a cold look. The Akatsuki cloak he wore swayed in the cold night wind. Umbu used this opportunity to readjust their formation and formed a siege array, surrounding Kakuzu. Kakuzu glanced around and confirmed that the number of Umbu besieging him is a total of 16, and he really felt troubled. Not to say that he was afraid or anything, but this battle is a complete disaster for him. The day was originally supposed to be similar to all, and he was just going to exchange the corpse for the bounty. Suddenly encountered two members of Amatsukami, although there were slight murderous intentions, not to the extent that the matter would become so much troublesome. But unexpectedly Sandaime Hokage and Uchiha Fugaku arrived leading their combat forces. Those bastards from Amatsukami revealed such information, and lo and behold, he is in such a situation. Boom! At this moment there was a roar from the far side of the river where Sandaime Hokage was fighting Sasori. Kakuzu and the Umbu all looked over and they see the traces of ice and fire. Seeing the scene, Kakuzu thought, has Sasori already taken out the ice puppet? As the teammate with Sasori for the past few months, Kakuzu also knows that Sasori wouldn't use the human puppet so easily. Once the human puppet was used, it would mean that the battle will be extremely fierce, and here it doesn't seem unreasonable, given that he is fighting the Hokage. As for the Konoha Umbu, they were all a little worried. Seeing the traces of ice release on the battlefield by the river, they all thought that Suijin with an extraordinary strong water release and ice release was also there and couldn't help but be worried about Sandaime. One of the Umbu quickly said, solve him and support Hokage-sama as quickly as possible. The other Umbu members nodded one after another and launched a flurry of attacks at once. Kakuzu leaped high avoiding a howling wind-style jutsu, but before he could land on the ground, he was hit by several kunai tied with explosive tags and was drowned in a series of explosions. Looking at the smoke and dust in the sky, one of the Umbu said, did that kill him? Another Umbu answered, I saw him being pierced by a kunai. I am afraid he shouldn't have any method to avoid the damage at such a short distance, besides the explosive tags should have killed him. At this moment when the two Umbu relaxed their vigilance, two arms penetrated through the cover of charred smoke, grabbed the throat of the two of them and dragged them inside in the blink of an eye. Ah! Only the screaming of two people could be heard. By the time smoke gradually disappeared, everyone found out that the necks of the two Umbu held by Kakuzu were twisted at an impossible angle. Their bodies were thrown aside as if just a piece of trash, while Kakuzu spoke with a grim tone, coming after me was the greatest mistake you all could have ever made. Suddenly the piercing sound of the chirping of thousands of birds was heard, and in the next moment, an Umbu appeared behind him, arm flashing with lightning immediately pierced through the chest, successfully destroying the heart from behind. Cough cough, it can't be, you snuck behind me. Coughing a mouthful of blood, Kakuzu turned his head with some difficulty and found out that the person who attacked him was an Umbu with wearing a dog mask and silver-white hair swaying in the wind. Currently, Dog, the only member of Umbu Team 11 was here. Because of Sandaime's orders, Monkey has returned to the village in search of Eagle and Cat, so he was the only one of the Team 11 following the other Umbu to chase after the two bounty nin. And Kakuzu was highly surprised that he of all people was taken in by the surprise attack from behind. You are. The dog Umbu didn't bother answering, he just coldly pulled out his right hand that pierced Kakuzu's chest. As Dog pulled out his hand, Kakuzu's pupil shrank from the pain he felt, a large amount of blood splattered from the hole in his chest, and then he lifelessly fell to the ground. Thump. The Konoha Umbu that were scattered around carefully glanced at Kakuzu, who lifelessly lied on the ground. Seeing no movement from the other party, their eyes turned towards the battlefield by the river no far away. The chest was completely pierced. In the eyes of all the Konoha Umbu, the bounty nin who attempted to assassinate Shodaime-sama can obviously not survive such an injury, so everyone believed that Kakuzu, who lied on the ground, is dead. Now their attention turned towards the other battlefield. They have to support Sandaime-sama. Unbeknownst to the Umbu, several masked earth grudge monsters suddenly jumped out of Kakuzu's back, and before either of them could notice, one of the masks, the one with the lightning element, suddenly spit out lightning that instantly covered the Konoha Umbu. In Suijin's spiritual world under the effect of Taikyakuzu, the yin-yang eternal prison. Seeing that the black and white was slowly fading away, Suijin, who was trapped inside Uchiha Fugaku's Genjutsu space, immediately reacted, and asked the chubby Ryumyaku dragon lightly floating in the air, "Hey, how come it took so long to react? Your response was a bit slow. If anything, it would have come a bit difficult for me to solve it, and only with Tenseigan, something would have happened, and that would have become a bit troublesome." "It took some time to get past the barriers," spoke Ryumyaku in a childish tone. Kuroto nodded in understanding. It is not difficult for him to understand this because Ryumyaku has been sealed inside the gourd, although there is a spiritual contract between the two, given the fact that Ryumyaku is not directly sealed inside his body, so getting past the barriers might be a bit difficult and more time-consuming. Everything has its own advantages and disadvantages. If Ryumyaku was sealed inside his body, then the situation would have been a bit easier, but this is also fine. Suijin wasn't much worried. After all, even the Yonde Mizuki Karatachi Yagura, who was the Jinchuriki of Sanbai, with Kage-level strength, also fell prey to Genjutsu, so there is no guarantee that such a situation cannot happen. The reality, in the forest. The elites of Uchiha saw that both Suijin and Homasubi were successfully controlled by Patriarch's Genjutsu, and they very overjoyed. After all, Wicked Eye Fugaku is not a joke. They were only waiting for the signal from the Patriarch, and they would immediately kill both of them. However, at this time, what none of them expected, both Fugaku and Homasubi fell to the ground at the same time, vomited blood, and gasping for breath. The Uchiha were shocked and hurriedly helped the Patriarch, and asked, "Fugaku-sama, are you alright?" Fugaku just shook his head, not bothering to answer, but intently stared at Homasubi, who was not much better than him. Fugaku didn't expect that Homasubi in front of was able to forcefully break free of the semi-genjutsu field. However, Fugaku also knew that the opposite party must have consumed quite a lot in this process. Homasubi, whose situation was obviously not much better, glanced at Suijin and muttered lightly, "I must first help Suijin to break free of the genjutsu." Fugaku naturally understood what the other party was thinking and said coldly, "You can break free, that is something I can accept, but don't expect that a ninja with a mere ice release Kekiai Genkai will be able to break free." However, Fugaku's words were not completed, and suddenly something unexpected happened. Out of a sudden, Suijin regained his consciousness and instantly vanished from his spot, taking away Homasubi with him. The process was so fast that others could barely react to it. The sudden action of Suijin caught Fugaku off guard, and even his stern face was a bit flabbergasted, couldn't hide the surprise. If it said that Homasubi was able to break free of the Taikyakuzu, it is still within an acceptable range of Fugaku, as the other party has the Manjikyu Sharingan with much higher ocular power than his, but the fact that Suijin, who doesn't have the Manjikyu Sharingan, was also able to break free of the Taikyakuzu without any help, greatly surprised him. It was beyond his expectations. Moreover, that purple creature is also something incomprehensible. What exactly was that? Thought Fugaku with a frown. Seeing that two members of Amatsukami ran away, the members of the Konoha military police force wanted to stop them. But Fugaku stretched out his hand to stop them and said seriously, "Let them go. Patriarch, why not chase? They humiliated the Uchiha clan. Do you just want to let the two of them escape? They are trying to step over the Uchiha clan and the village." The members of the Konoha military police force were puzzled and looked towards the Patriarch with confusion. Fugaku just shook his head and said with a gloomy tone, "That Homasubi is an Uchiha, and he has a pair of Manjikyu Sharingan." Hearing Fugaku's words, everyone was startled. One of Uchiha couldn't help but ask, "Patriarch, is he Shinichi?" As far as the Uchiha are aware, only Shinichi and Shursui have awakened the Manjikyu Sharingan, so that person has to be Shinichi. Everyone knows of Shursui's straight and honest personality, so they excluded him to be Homasubi. And since there isn't anyone else with the Manjikyu Sharingan, then it can only be Shinichi, who defected from Konoha and joined some bounty organization if the rumors are correct. However, they were all wrong, as Fugaku shook his head and said with a frown, "He is not Shinichi, nor is he Shursui. If anything, the most likely possibility is that he is the one responsible for controlling the Kyubi and destroying the village, and for the death of Yondaime Hokage, it is him who is responsible for the problems that the clan is facing." "What?" exclaimed someone in shock. Another one added in anger, "So it was this bastard. Then we can't let him escape, he has to pay for what he did, he has to die." All the Uchiha were more and more furious. Fugaku sighed lightly and shook his head. We can't rush headfirst here. The opponent has Manjikyu Sharingan. Even if we kill, we will have to pay a considerable price. Besides, if I didn't guess it wrong, even that Suijin has something up his sleeve that makes his strength no inferior to that of Homasubi. We have to plan out carefully from here on out. In Fugaku's cognition, the threat that Suijin posed has increased a lot. If it was only Ice Release Kekiai Genkai, Fugaku wouldn't have worried much, because he truly believes that the power of the Sharingan is superior to all other Kekiai Genkai, even better than Byakugan. But Suijin was able to break free of Taikyakuzu. This feat alone is no joke. Not to mention that purple blob of highly condensed chakra that reminded Fugaku of a tailed beast. Therefore, he has to be cautious in dealing with the enemy. The other Uchiha also understood the seriousness of the matter and asked, "Then Patriarch, what should we do?" After thinking a little, he said, "Let's first meet up with Sandaime and see how the situation turns out." While running, Suijin and Homasubi glanced back occasionally to see if they were being chased by the Konoha military police force. After confirming that they weren't being followed, both of them breathed a sigh of relief. Homasubi spoke, "It seems that Patriarch isn't following us." Suijin nodded after a bit of thinking. It seems us breaking free of his Manjikyu Sharingan dojutsu startled him a little, making him consider us a real threat, therefore we were able to bluff our way out. Fugaku's dojutsu affected both Suijin and Homasubi, and the technique was obviously Manjikyu specific. Suijin was able to break free and not much affected because his spiritual power is that of Tenseigan, which is why his soul wasn't much affected by whatever that was, and thanks to Ryumyaku acting as a guide, he was able to successfully break free, which obviously surprised Fugaku, making him more cautious. Even Suijin would be the same if he was in Fugaku's place if someone easily broke free of an ability he had absolute confidence in. It's just that Fugaku doesn't know that the current situation of the two is not much better. After all, first Suijin fought against Sandaime for such a long time. Even if he has an artificial Biju at his side to provide him with chakra, the refining does tire him out, so firstly fighting with Sandaime, then so many Uchiha at the same time, and finally dealing with Fugaku, Suijin is quite tired. Although Homasubi's situation is better, Homasubi still can't openly use techniques like Susanoo and body flicker that are his main strength, as that would easily expose his true identity. So, his actions are also a bit limited. Moreover, Homasubi also got some injuries due to hesitation to deal with the Uchiha clan. Therefore, if Fugaku really chased them, the direction of the outcome of the battle would be a bit uncertain, and in fact, the balance would be a bit tilted towards Fugaku, meaning that the two members of Amatsukami would be at a disadvantage. At this time, Homasubi said with a bitter smile, "It was as you said, Patriarch really has the Manjikyu Sharingan." Fugaku deliberately concealed his Manjikyu Sharingan. This shows that even he didn't have much trust in the Hokage faction, but he isn't wrong to do so. After all, the impact that Uchiha Madara caused with his Manjikyu Sharingan was too much for the senior to forget, therefore, it is unknown what actions they might have taken. Besides, Shursui really doesn't have much say in it. After all, when he revealed his Manjikyu Sharingan, he also caused too much trouble for the Uchiha clan, so the Patriarch's actions are understandable. Sighing lightly, Homasubi asked, "So what should we do next?" Suijin smiled. And he was about to say something, but suddenly, the presence of two strong chakra signs appeared in his field of vision of his Byakugan. Suijin instantly warned, "Stop here, we have company." Homasubi asked, "Who is it?" Suijin didn't reply immediately, but there was a light chuckle. Homasubi was confused. If it is the enemy, then why would Suijin chuckle? So, asked again, "Suijin, who did you see?" Suijin just replied casually, "Don't worry too much, it's the two guys from the Akatsuki organization, let's go greet them." Homasubi nodded and the two walked in that direction, and after a while, the two sides met. Looking at the figure of Sasori and Kakuzu on the opposite side, Suijin couldn't help but laugh inwardly. Both Kakuzu and Sasori's appearance is really laughable. The traditional Akatsuki cloak Kakuzu was wearing has been mostly torn apart, leaving only a part attached to the collar and half sleeve, giving the both of them a miserable look. Compared to Kakuzu, Sasori's condition is worse. His entire left arm was missing along with several other injuries. While Suijin and Homasubi were observing Sasori and Kakuzu, the other two were also observing the opponent. The Suijin-specific black cloak he was wearing had several cuts over it along with several wounds left by the Uchiha elites, which were quite conspicuous. Homasubi on the side was much better, with just a bit of ragged breathing and some light injuries, along with light chakra exhaustion. The two sides that encountered each other in the forest didn't rush to fight. Under the Suijin's mask, Kuroto's Byakugan was activated as he assessed the state of Sasori and Kakuzu. From the first glance, it seems that the injuries that Sasori has are more serious. The loss of an arm is fatal for a shinobi, as it has a great effect on the strength that a shinobi can display. The difference in strength that Jiraiya showed while fighting pain before and after losing his arm is quite different. The biggest problem would be hand sign printing. Not everyone is capable of printing hand signs at the same speed with just one arm. But the case with Sasori is different. As human puppet master, he can control puppets with just one arm fairly well, so even though his combat power would have been decreased, the battle still wouldn't be too easy as long as the puppets he has in his hand are good enough. Moving his gaze towards Kakuzu, Suijin found that the chakra reaction he perceived from Kakuzu was much weaker compared to before. The Earth Grudgefear is a really strange technique that has probably altered his body to such a degree that he is no longer dependent on his normal chakra circulatory system. Therefore, in his Byakugan, Suijin isn't seeing any normal chakra veins in Kakuzu's body like that of other shinobi. What he sees is a complex network of black threads that are chakra carriers and are connected to the 4 cores, which are the 4 masks hidden in Kakuzu's body. However, he has still not understood the essence of the 4 masked thread monsters. Therefore, how much injury Kakuzu has incurred is difficult to estimate. According to the rough estimate, he roughly has only about 30% of his chakra. It's either because he has consumed much of it in the previous battle, or he has lost some of his hearts. I would bet on the second possibility. This guess wasn't without any basis. It's because Suijin also found that the chakra reaction of the cores was somewhat strange. To be more exact, the chakra reaction of the chest and right abdomen was significantly weaker than the other places, which means that 2 of his hearts were damaged, which means only 3 of his hearts were left. While Suijin was in a bit of a bind, thinking about whether to take the advantage of the opportunity and get rid of Sasori and Kakuzu for good, Sasori spoke in a cold tone, "You bastards, you dare to appear before us." As soon as he spoke, he can't help but cough out some blood. It seems his injuries are much severe. Suijin raised his hands up and said with a smirk, "Hey, don't blame me. The 2 of you have done such things that would prompt others to hunt you down. I just encouraged Konohagakure to fasten that process. After all, the sooner the S-class missing nin are disposed of, the better, don't you think so? But I have to say, you were able to escape from the chase of Sandaime Hokage. Your skills aren't bad, to say the least." Sasori just snorted, "I will not forget this account." At this time Kakuzu said, "You have been meddling with us. I see that you have the potential, so I am giving you a fair warning. It would be wise of you to not make an enemy of the Akatsuki organization. You will regret it in the future." "You don't say?" "Thanks for the heads up, I'll keep that in mind." Suijin nodded gratefully. "You better do." Kakuzu said. "Most certainly, but I don't like to owe others a favor, so I am also giving you a heads up. It's only fair if both sides know each other, right? Therefore, it's best that you know that Amatsukami is not afraid of Akatsuki, so we will be having quite a lot of meetings in the future, I tell ya." Suijin said. Hearing Suijin's words, Sasori took out a scroll and spoke, "You wanna die, don't you?" Suijin shook his head, and said, No, not right now. Don't you see, there are still a large number of Konoha shinobi around. I don't think I need to explain any further." Kakuzu nodded, "That is a wise choice. If we fight here, it will only make it easier for Konoha to get their hands on all 4 of us." Homasubi nodded. Sasori closed the scroll in his hand. "All right, you get to live this time." "Well, now that we have an agreement, we'll move on our respective paths," Suijin said. With that decision, Suijin and Homasubi gave way to one side, while Sasori and Kakuzu gave way to the other. Suijin and Homasubi moved towards the village and Sasori and Kakuzu towards the opposite side of the village. Passing by each other, the 2 groups slowed down. Just at the moment the both of them crossed each other, Suijin quickly formed the hand seals and leaped into the air. Ice release, 1,000 flying needles of death. Ice release secret technique, demonic mirroring ice crystals. Homasubi did a backflip while printing the hand seals and threw a few shurikens and released fire. Fire release, great fireball technique. On the other side, Sasori also immediately took out the puppet from the scroll, attached it with chakra strings, and shouted, "Dead bone pulse, dance of the seedling fern." And Kakuzu was also not behind as the 2 thread monsters jumped out of his body. Fire release, intelligent hard work. Wind release, pressure damage. 2 shinobi on each side, for in total, attacked at the exact instant. Boom. 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 Instantly the small forest mountain that they were on shook by the collision of the ninjutsu on the 2 sides. Compared to the small-scale ninjutsu used by Suijin and Homasubi, the attack used by Sasori and Kakuzu was undoubtedly much fiercer. It's because they were boiling with anger inside. Especially Sasori, he even didn't hesitate in using the dance of the seedling fern with the Kagaya clan puppet. Compared to the 1,000 flying needles of death great fireball technique and the combination of wind and fire release jutsu used by Kakuzu, the dance of the seedling fern is a much dangerous technique. Accompanied by the shaking of the ground, piercing bone spears rose from the ground one after another. Suijin was quick with hands and pulled Homasubi inside the ice mirror that was floating in the air. The bone spears kept rising but didn't affect the two as they were at a higher altitude. Standing on the top of a bone spear, Sasori frowned. That's a surprise, you can use ice release? Does that mean you are a member of the Yuki clan? At this time, Sasori didn't show any signs of weakness, even the blood he seemed to be coughing out was not there. Suijin leaned out half of his body from the ice mirror and questioned Kakuzu, hey, didn't you say that we should not fight here, aren't we going to go our separate ways? Sasori hummed lightly, it seemed that you were the one who made the move first. Suijin has already noticed that Kakuzu is hidden behind a thick bone spear, and the two thread monsters were speared around, he seemed ready to attack any moment. Understanding that both of them still retained quite a lot of combat power, Suijin did some light-speed calculations in his brain and said with an embarrassed laugh, while scratching the back of his head awkwardly, Sandaime Hokage and Wicked Eye Fugaku are still around, so let's continue on our separate ways, okay? When Suijin mentioned Sandaime, Sasori thought a little and said, alright, it seems that the attack just now was only a misunderstanding. Suijin nodded, yes, it appears that all four of us had a bit of a misunderstanding. With that said, Suijin didn't deactivate the ice mirrors, just lined them up in a queue and flew away. Whoosh! Whoosh! Sasori and Kakuzu also didn't wait any longer and flickered and disappeared from the forest of bones. Whoosh! 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 Not long after the four shinobi disappeared, Sandaime still carrying his adamantine staff led the Umbu members and arrived at the forest of bone. Looking at the endless number of bone spears, Sandaime had a solemn look on his face, and muttered, this is dead bone pulse, Kekiai Genkai of the Kagaya clan? While the Umbu spread around searching for the traces of the two members of Akatsuki, Uchiha Fugaku led the members of the Konoha military police force and arrived. Fugaku was surprised when he noticed that even Sandaime seemed to have failed in capturing or killing either of the two members of Akatsuki, which... At this moment, whether it was the god of shinobi or the Wicked Eye, both of them had an embarrassed face. The silence and the Aho crow made the atmosphere quite awkward, Sandaime said with some emotion, these bounty ninjas are not easy. Fugaku nodded repeatedly, yes, they can't be taken lightly. Looking at the forest of piercing high bones, whether it was Sandaime Hokage or Uchiha Patriarch, both of them had a gloomy expression. In their eyes, or better yet in the eyes of great shinobi villages, the bounty ninjas are just some small-time shinobi not worth putting attention to, unless they try sticking their nose where they shouldn't, therefore, the presence of bounty nin are generally ignored. But the series of events and the battles that took place today has changed this perception, these two groups of bounty nin cannot be ignored. Unexpectedly, there are still so many strong shinobi hidden in the shadows of the shinobi world. Sandaime thought with a solemn expression while looking at the cold moonlight of the full moon. The increasing rift between the Uchiha clan and the village has already caused too much headache for Sandaime. Now he doesn't even know what will happen to the peace treaty that was signed with Kumogakure, everything has been becoming messy, Sandaime really feels exhausted. If only Minato was alive, everything would have been gone smoothly. Muttered Hiruzen helplessly. Today Sandaime didn't go all out in the battle, this is something even the Hokage guard platoon could see. The reason for this is very simple, Sandaime is worried that if something were to happen to him, the Uchiha clan will no longer have any scruples and the village will fall into civil strife, and the other village wouldn't let such a chance go to waste. The result, not only would Konoha be destroyed but even the Land of Fire will be plunged into the biggest war ever seen. But now Sandaime feels that he was a bit too conservative, if even the enemy is not captured then aside from losing the faith of his subordinates, even obtaining the required intelligence of the two bounty nin organization will become quite difficult. Even Fugaku had a solemn look when he thought of Homasubi of Amatsukami. The sudden appearance of an Uchiha with the Manjikyu Sharingan is not a joke, moreover, the person in question seems to have negative intentions towards the clan and the village, and if it was really him who controlled the Kyubi during the Kyubi rebellion, and indirectly killed Yondaime Hokage, then that means he will not stop until he achieves his objective of destroying the clan and the village. It's unforgivable. Fugaku made up his mind, he must find out the true identity of Homasubi and then kill him, for the sake of the clan, and for the village. Unlike Fugaku who was worried, the elites of the Uchiha clan were embarrassed because they failed to eliminate only two bounty nin. Before they were being overly aggressive, arrogant, and overconfident, and now not only was each one of them injured to some degree, but even their faces also had disappointed looks, even after they were injured or more, they achieved nothing. Uchiha Fugaku is still considering whether to reveal the fact that Homasubi of Amatsukami has Manjikyu Sharingan to Hokage-sama. After all, in his opinion, Homasubi must die but the pair of Manjikyu Sharingan he has can be used by the Uchiha clan. However, another problem lies here, will the Hokage faction allow the Uchiha clan to take back that pair of Manjikyu Sharingan? Or will it lead to a more severe conflict? allowing Hatake Kakashi to keep the Sharingan is already the biggest compromise the Uchiha clan has made, and it was solely done because of the fact that Uchiha Obito willingly passed it on to Hatake Kakashi, otherwise Uchiha clan wouldn't have allowed Kakashi to keep the Sharingan. So, this issue is a bit troublesome. On the other side, after getting away from Sasori and Kakuzu, Suijin didn't go all the way in the ice mirror and deactivated the jutsu. After a series of battles, Suijin was a bit overwhelmed even if he has the Ryumyaku chakra, so it was best to not keep the ninjutsu activated for too long. Homusubi asked, "So, what's next?" Suijin spoke, "We will have to return to the village first." At this time Homusubi questioned again, "But how are you going to explain this situation to Hyuga Patriarch? He knows that it was the Eagle and Cat of Umbu Team 11 who took away Watanabe's corpse, but the body suddenly fell into the hands of two bounty nin. This flaw is too obvious. I am worried that Hayashi-sama will see through our disguise." Suijin shook his head, "You don't have to worry about Hayashi-sama figuring us out, besides he wouldn't be revealing the involvement of Hyuga clan with this incident. This incident was caused because Watanabe deliberately wanted to cause conflict between the Hokage faction and the Hyuga clan. As the patriarch of Hyuga clan, Hyuga Hayashi will obviously not be stupid enough to show the involvement of the Hyuga clan with this incident. In fact, he would be really glad that the two bounty nin took Watanabe's corpse and claimed the bounty on his head. With this, there would no longer be any official involvement of the Hyuga clan with this incident anymore." Shursui was still worried. Won't Hayashi-sama be able to figure out that Uchiha Shursui is Homusubi and Hyuga Kuroto is Suijin? As I said, he won't, even if he might be a bit suspicious, but the fact that Suijin had ice release Kekkei Genkai, so he couldn't be sure about it, because the shinobi named Hyuga Kuroto doesn't have ice release. "And what about me?" asked Homusubi. "Since he can't be sure of me, so he would obviously be unsure about you, we just have to present a good enough alibi and we are all clear for the time being," explained Suijin. Homusubi nodded. After thinking a little, Suijin questioned, "By the way, when you broke free of Uchiha Fugaku's technique, was your Manjikyu Sharingan exposed?" Homusubi quickly said, "With the sealing techniques you engraved in the mask, it blocked Patriarch's exploration, therefore, Patriarch shouldn't have seen my Manjikyu pattern, but he did realize that Homusubi has Manjikyu Sharingan." After a short pause, he continued, "But Patriarch used his Manjikyu technique, and I had to break free of it using my ocular power, therefore if he experiences my ocular power again, he might be able to guess that was me." Suijin nodded, and continued, "Don't worry about it, we will come to that problem in the future." With that out of the way, Suijin asked again, "Given that Homusubi used all his ocular power to cast a genjutsu, what would be the result if he uses a sneak attack on Uchiha Shursui? Would it be possible to defeat Uchiha Shursui?" Homusubi was taken aback for a moment and immediately understood what Suijin was trying to ask. "You mean, that we use the alibi that we encountered a sneak attack from both the members of Amatsukami at the same time, that way we wouldn't be under suspicion?" Suijin nodded. In Suijin's opinion, as long as both Eagle and Cat of Umbu Team 11 encountered a sneak attack from Suijin and Homusubi of Amatsukami at the same time and end up being defeated, then the suspicion would obviously be resolved. After a little consideration, Homusubi nodded. "As far as I understand, the power of Manjikyu Sharingan can vary from person to person, and since Homusubi is very strong and experienced, then it isn't strange for Uchiha Shursui to be defeated under the combined sneak attack from Suijin and Homusubi at the same time. In that case, we will have to carry on the preparation of the alibi." With that said, Suijin started devising the plan to set up their alibi. If you want to support me, check out my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/Kayashin. I tend to polls that decide important plot stuff in my P at Trian. Many thanks to my awesome patrons. Ben Phillips.
If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.